Let's take the prayer, please. And we can join together. Master of all worlds, highest power, merciful parent of compassion, in your presence, eternal one, source of strength for us, as you have been for our ancestors, we very humbly acknowledge you. What are we? What is our life that you have done such great kindness to us? Therefore, we place our appeals before you, so that you may forgive and absolve us of all our faults and failings. Let our faults never become barriers between us and you. And may it be your desire to prepare our hearts to feel awe and love for you. May you listen to these words of ours, and may you open our encumbered hearts to the mysteries of your Torah. May this, our study, be a source of pleasure before your throne of glory, like sweet incense. May you shower down upon us the light of our soul source, in all the ways by which we define ourselves. May the sparks of your holy servants, whom you have revealed these words to the world, shine and sparkle. May their merit, their ancestors' merit, the merit of their Torah, their innocence, and their holiness stand for us, so as to prevent us from stumbling when we study these words. In their merit, may our eyes be illumined by what we study, as in the saying of the sweet singer of Israel. Open my eyes that I may gaze into wonders of your Torah. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be acceptable to you, my rock and my redeemer. For it is the eternal who grants wisdom. It is from his knowledge and understanding. Na 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 Ananana. 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 We're on page, oops, we're on page 309. And we're coming close to the end of our discussion of this Torah portion. Did we get to the break on the page? We basically got to the end, right? We had the very striking suggestion, which we've had before a number of times, that there is, in the end, a basic kinship between Isaac and Esav. Even though Yaakov is the blessed one, there's something very, very primally connected between Yitzchak and Esav. And that's the blessing that that Isaac Yitzchak gives to Esav, is paradoxically, in a certain sense, coming more out of Yitzchak than the blessing that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov. That it's, in a certain sense, more true to Yitzchak's essence than the blessing that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov. The blessing that Yitzchak gave to Yaakov is a blessing that he is a conduit for. He is passing it along as the son of Abraham. And we've had this, mentioned in different ways by the Zohar as well. And the point of the blessing is to make it from Abraham through Yitzchak into Yaakov. But then there's Yitzchak as Yitzchak. And in that sense of Yitzchak being on the left side, there's a kinship. Esav is his son, and that's the repetition that we have in toward the end of the statement, Rabbi Elazar. You are my son, after all. This is it. You're my son. So the blessing I'm going to give you is my blessing, not the overall blessing that comes out of the flow that needs to keep on continuing. It's a blessing that actually goes outside. And the last, let's just read the last paragraph before we get to the break and the new section. And before I even ask, there she is. Beryl, thank you.
Am I beginning with the "and you will"?
Yeah, please.
And you will serve your brother. This has not yet been fulfilled, for Esav has not served Yaakov, since Jacob did not want it now. Repeatedly he called him my Lord, having gazed afar, deferring it to the end of days, as we have said.
Right. So I just want to take a real quick look here at the reference. Right. So the blessing that Yitzchak gives to Esav says, "Hinei mishmanei haaretz yeh moshevecha." Your dwelling will be from the fat of the land. Umitala shamayim me'al, and you'll benefit also from the dew that comes from the heavens above. Ve'al charbacha tichya, you will live by your sword. Ve'et achicha ta'avod, and you shall serve your brother. And remember, we had before, when they were born, or before they were born, when they were in utero, we had the phrase "V'rav ya'avod sa'ir." But even though most people understand that to be a prophecy that the greater, the Rav, the older brother, will serve the younger, it's not at all clear what that means. But here it's absolutely clear. You will serve your brother. You, Esav, will serve Yaakov. But when you sort of muster up all your power, then you will be able to break his yoke from you, from your neck. So if we read it that way, right, then what's the end prediction? How do we understand the simple meaning of the verse? You will serve your brother, but you have the capability to shake off that yoke from your neck. Right? You have the capability of turning the tables, of taking Jacob's mastery and overthrowing it. So it's actually the ending of his blessing leaves the possibility that Esav can overcome this destiny that he needs to serve his brother. It's a little. I mean, it leaves that possibility open, I think, in the simple meaning of the verse. But we have here the explanation seems like Rabbi Elazar is giving it. And it says, you will serve your brother. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. So what about the next part of it? So if you look at 372, right?
This has not yet been fulfilled, for Esav has not served Jacob. On the contrary, Israel has been dominated by powers symbolized by Esav, Rome and medieval Christianity.
Okay, so we've been living in constant galut, in constant exile, galus, subjugated to to the more powerful authorities that have ruled the cultures that we are involved in, and they're not serving us at all. So when does this blessing become fulfilled? Now I just want to wonder, well, what does that mean then? If the blessing should become fulfilled, then don't we have to worry about an uprising of Esav to overthrow that blessing? Doesn't Yitzchak seem to allow for that to possibly happen? So he says, "Ve'im tarid," if you will, and the word tarid is a little strange word, but if somehow you summon up your powers, you'll be able to overthrow. Does that mean that if we subjugate Esav enough, he will never be able to overthrow our power, and we will defeat Esav forever? But nevertheless, it seems to be hanging in the air there. Here it seems to be just seeing the first part of the verse without that other possibility. So the answer, though, that the Zohar gives here is, we're assuming apparently that that Jacob is supposed to rule Esav somewhere along the line. It hasn't happened yet. Why not? The answer is because Jacob has been willing to wait. He doesn't want it now. He keeps on calling him Adoni, Adoni Esav, Adoni. He says it again and again and again. If you look at 373, you have citations again and again when Jacob meets his brother after being, with Lavan for 20 years. So he keeps on addressing him before he meets him. And then when he meets him, he keeps on saying, you are my master, you are my Lord. So he is relinquishing his opportunity or his capability to rule over his brother. He says it to him, and we looked at it last time, Kachnat birchati, take my blessing, take it, please. A Rodney Dangerfield moment. So the attitude that Yaakov has is of subservience. He's ready to put himself completely under Esav's control. So he's relinquishing for now, cashing in on that blessing. When is he going to take it and demand that it be fulfilled? Having gazed afar, deferring it to the end of days, as we have said. So he will push it off until the very, very end. And then when Mashiach comes, then Jacob, Israel, will be restored to its sovereignty, and Esav will be subservient to Yaakov. So that's the way this verse, this paragraph reads. But as I say, it's a little uncomfortable to ignore that very end of it. So there's one, in the commentators, there's one alternative viewing that is dismissed by Rav Moshe Cordovero and by the others, that there was a suggestion that maybe this gazing to afar and deferring it doesn't mean deferring it to the time of Mashiach. It means deferring it to when Rabbi and Antoninus were friends. Rabbi was Rabbi Judah the Prince, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was the first patriarch of the Jewish people under the auspices of the Romans. This is approximately 200 CE, so a couple of generations after the destruction of the Second Temple. And Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Judah the Patriarch, is of course the scholar and the leader. He combines both Torah scholarship and also political power and also riches, wealth, and he leads the Jewish people in a very, very successful way. And of course, he's responsible for the production of the Mishnah, the beginning of codifying rabbinic teachings. The first teachings of the rabbis to be put into form is the Mishnah, and he was the sponsor and the editor of that. So he succeeded in, of course, changing the course of Jewish history for the better, in my opinion, and making it possible for the Jewish people to continue to live and thrive as Jews. There is a kind of a legendary set of stories that the Roman emperor Antoninus, although scholars don't think it's the Roman emperor, they think maybe it's the procurator or the local Roman official, was very, very friendly with Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Now, of course, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi did have very friendly relations with the Romans, because otherwise he wouldn't have been enabled to be the patriarch. So in many ways, he was a puppet of the Romans, and able to therefore accomplish all kinds of good things for the Jewish people, but all at the good humor of the Romans. But the way the stories tell it is that often Antoninus defers to Rebbe and learns from Rebbe and listens to Rebbe, So he recognizes him as the superior leader. And the way this interpretation wants to put it is that's when Yaakov finally actually becomes the one that Esav serves. Esav is Antoninos, and Yaakov is the one that he puts himself into a secondary position to. If that's the case, then of course it was a temporary situation, because in the end, Rome continued to assert its authority and definitely ruled over Israel, and Christianity ruled over Israel as Esav and Edom. So that would be a complete fulfillment of the verse. But then, of course, the full reckoning would have to happen then during the time of the Mashiach, when Yaakov gets his full blessing, as we've seen before. Then the blessing of Yaakov becomes preeminent. But what this also would indicate is that Yitzchak's blessing is a this-worldly blessing. We've had it before. Yitzchak's blessing, because it comes from Yitzchak and is not the blessing channeled from above, but it's Yitzchak's blessing. It's therefore, it's a more limited blessing. Yitzchak is the sphere of limitation. It's a more limited blessing, and it's confined to this realm of existence, not to the time of the Mashiach and further on. All right. So now we have a little break in our English translation to indicate that we come to a new piece. And we have a walking story. So the story begins, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Yossi, and here we go.
Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi were walking on the way. As they were walking, they saw Rabbi Yesa the elder walking behind them. They sat until he reached them. Once he did, they said, "Now the way before us is paved." They walked on. Rabbi Chia said, "Time to act for Yud He Vav He."
Okay, so we'll stop here for a second. So Rabbi Chia says, time to act. Eit lasot lashem. The note, 375.
Time to act for Yud He Vav He by engaging in Torah.
Okay, so it's time to start learning Torah together. And now we'll go into a bunch of exchanges of Torah insights and so on. So, but before we get there, as I like to keep on pointing out, there's a whole bunch of intro here that tells us about these very, mundane aspects of the story. Theoretically, we could have Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yossi met Rabbi Yesa, right? Rabbi Yesa Saba, Rabbi Yesa the elder. So, and then they said, oh, now it's three of us. The road is now set for us. It's paved. Now it's put before us. It's all ready because we are three, right? To be three is a big deal. Three is a crowd, as we know. And three people together for the Zohar is a kind of a triad. We'll get to discussions of the triad. It reflects the triadic nature of God. So not Trinitarian nature of God, but the triadic nature of God. They go, oh, this is great. But even that's what it could have done. But instead, we have these little details. And the walking is here. They walk. Somebody else is walking. They sit down. They wait for the person to go. And even if we wanted to ignore the walking, okay, the Zohar just wants to tell a story. Even if we wanted to ignore the walking, if we just read the first paragraph, right? Let's read it one more time with feeling.
Rabbi Hia and Rabbi Yossi were walking on the way. As they were walking, they saw Rabbi Yossi the elder walking behind them. They sat until he reached them. Once he did, they said, "Now the way before us is paved."
And then we could have, Rabbi Chia said, Eit lasot Lashem. Rabbi Chia then could say, okay, now there's three of us are together, let's start learning Torah. But we got this little tiny little phrase, they walked on. They kept on walking. And then we have the invitation to start studying Torah. So the Zohar makes a point of picturing these people walking, and then somebody else is walking. Hey, it would be nice to walk together. So they wait for the other person till he catches up, and then they keep on walking. This is great. Three of us together can walk. They walk before they learn. They walk before they start talking and learning. So this is, of course, the theme that I pursue in the study that I wrote about the walking stories, that this is this pre-Torah moment. This is this just being in the world. The existence of these three people is, to use something that we just came out of, they're living in Esav's world. They're living in the real world. They're living in the limited world of mundane existence, and they're moving through it together. And then they launch. And then they take off. And they start flying in Torah. But first they walk. Okay, Rabbi Yossi.
Rabbi Yossi opens.
I just want to also just indicate that this is a partial quote of the verse, right? This is from Tehillim, from Psalms, from that long Psalm 119, right? And it's from the letter Ayin, so it's already at verse 126, right? And the first part of the verse is 8, that's the Ayin, the beginning of the verse. 8 la'asot Lashem, the time is to act for the eternal. What's the rest of the verse? The rest of the verse is two more words, Haferu Toratecha, which is very hard to translate, and it's been translated throughout rabbinic times and beyond in a number of ways. But it seems to be they have canceled your Torah. They have violated your Torah. The whole verse is a paradox. It's time to do something for God. They have violated your Torah, which could be a call to arms. Oh, all those bad people have violated the Torah. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to respond? So that's one way to read it. In some readings, it's read as, when we have a time that we need to work for God, it's an emergency, we have to even violate the Torah. Then if that's really what the times call for, then in order to save the Torah in the future, right now we have to violate the Torah. It's a very troublesome and challenging verse, and it's, as I say, it's been read in many of those kinds of meanings back and forth throughout Jewish history. Here, that kind of sharp point is erased, and it's only the first part that's being quoted. This is a time now for us to start doing something on God's behalf, right? Without the darker and more scary part of the verse. All right, let's see what happens.
Rabbi Yossi opened, saying, she opens her mouth with wisdom, Torah of love on her tongue.
Okay, so this is from Eshet Chayil. It's from that last chapter of the book of Proverbs that extols the ideal Israelite woman, who's a woman of valor, and Piha patcha b'chochma b'torat chesed al lishona. That's the verse, also from an alphabetical text, and she opens her mouth b'chochma, with wisdom, right? B'torat chesed al lishona, and a Torah of love is on her tongue. So this is his opening verse to start commenting on. Go ahead.
She opens her mouth with wisdom, assembly of Israel, touch of love on her tongue.
Torah.
Torah of love on her tongue. Israel, tongue of Torah, conversing in it day and night.
Okay. So, Assembly of Israel, you have a long note there. Knesset Yisrael.
Why would I turn the page? So stupid.
Yeah, come on. Slow down. We're walking slowly. They're walking on the road. They're just spaziering. They're just walking along, strolling, easy. That's it. No rushing here. Nobody's running.
I think of it as Suke de Zimra. Assembly of Israel.
Right. So it's not Suke de Zimra. Assembly of Israel is the collecting, the assembling of all of Israel. But who is Israel? Israel is Jacob. Jacob is Israel, right? And the assembling of all that is connected with Israel, with Jacob, is Shechina. Shechina takes into herself everything that Jacob produces, everything that Jacob pours forth. So Assembly of Israel is the collective reception of what the core of God's manifestation is all about. Right? So this is Shekhinah, and we, by extension, that's our job. Our job is to live out Shekhinah in this world. So how do we do that? Torat Chesed al Lashona. Israel, right? Lashon of the Torah. We are the ones who talk out the Torah. We are the ones who speak out the Torah day and night. When we talk about the Torah, this recalls the phrase Torah she'ba'al peh, the oral Torah, Torah of the mouth, Torah of talking, as opposed to Torah shebichtav, the Torah of writing, the Torah that is in writing. Jacob, Israel, Tiferet, is Torah shebichtav, is the fundamental Torah, the eternal Torah. Shekhinah and Knesset Yisrael, meaning us, the Assembly of Israel, all of Klal Yisrael, our job is to take the written Torah and talk about it forever. And talk about it and talk about it and expound it and interpret it and add more Torah to it. So that is Torah she'ba'al peh. That's the talking Torah, the Torah of the mouth.
No, I'm sorry. I misled you in what my meaning was. My Suke de Zimra is equated with the walking thing. It's like
it's sort of like warming up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay. So now, what does this mean? She opens her mouth with wisdom. Now we're on 310.
She opens her mouth with wisdom. Baked of Bereshit, in the beginning, as they have established.
Okay. So look at note 378.
With wisdom, Bet of Bereshit, in the beginning, the opening letter of the Torah, Torah whose numerical value is 2, symbolizes the second, Sephirot, Chokmah, wisdom.
Wisdom. Okay, so she opens her mouth with wisdom or through wisdom, by means of wisdom. Be-chokhmah. So the bet is leading to chokhmah. The bet is also the first letter of the Torah, and it says Bereshit. So the Zohar has read this as well as other midrashic commentators. Bereshit doesn't mean in Reshit, in the beginning. It means by means of the beginning, right? Through, by means of the beginning. By using Reshit. Bara Elokim, God created the world. What is Reshit? Reshit Chokhmah Yirat Hashem. So the beginning of wisdom is awe, reverence for God. So we have a verse there that puts Reshit right next to Chokhmah. Reshit is Chokhmah. So Reshit, through wisdom, through Chokhmah, God created the world. And Shekhinah, she opens her mouth, she begins with wisdom. She begins to start expressing herself with wisdom. So Chokhmah is, of course, another name for one of God's manifestations. And if we look at our diagram at the beginning of the book, Chokhmah is the first manifestation after Keter. Right? Keter is at the very top, the pinnacle. Right? Keter is the crown. Keter is connected in some ineffable way with Ein Sof, with the unbounded, with the infinite, with the limitless. And then Chokhmah comes out of Keter, comes out of that ununderstandable, incomprehensible beginning of God's unfolding. And it's Chokhmah that has the thought to start creating. That's where the process of creativity begins to start taking shape. So she opens her mouth through Chokhmah. Yeah, Larry.
I just have a question. Where does Da'at come in? Does Da'at substitute for Keter, or I don't know?
No. So that is a term that floats around. Of course, Chabad puts it into the triad, Chokhmah, Binah, Da'at. That's how they get their name, Chabad. But earlier, look, what can I say? The names of the Sfirot gel at about the time of the Zohar. But there are various attempts to try to name manifestations of God that don't necessarily line up this way. So if you look, for instance, in Sefer Abba here, you get a slightly different way of looking at how God can be, chopped up and diced up into pieces. But in the time of the Zohar, if you want to think about Da'at, I think the best way to think about Da'at is to think about it as the flow that goes through the channels between each sphira, if you need to talk about sphirot. So Chokhmah is a locus of divine energy and of divine particular manifestation. Binah is another place like that, right? But they're all flowing. They're all flowing together. There's a whole circulatory system that brings each quality that we have separated and stopped for a moment and took a snapshot of God's being, so to speak, at any particular moment. And we get 10 of these kinds of snapshots, and some of them are blurrier than others. But all those snapshots are false, an artificial stopping of something that is alive and all connected. The circulatory system of all of the divine life could be called Da'at. Later on, when people need to keep 10 as the magic number, and they really feel uncomfortable about Keter being one of these manifestations, because Keter is such an amorphous manifestation that it's hard to even call it a manifestation. That's why Chokhmah is the one that we can start talking about. What they do is they take out Keter altogether, and then they put in Da'at to substitute, to keep us with the as a triad that also keeps us within the 10. So it's later that it becomes identified as an independent sphera.
All right.
Yeah, David.
What have we done here? We start with Psalms 119, and then we're passed along to Proverbs 31. We've launched.
Yeah. So and what we're doing is in both of those verses, and this is one of the midrashic modes that you go around from these other books. Shir HaShirim is a typical place. Psalms is a typical place. Proverbs is a typical place. You go to those writings, you pick some verses out from there, you will expostulate and expound and expand and talk about something that in a new way that doesn't quite necessarily seem to be the very simple meaning of the verse. And then we start discerning a topic, and then eventually the topic should bring us to something connected to the Torah reading. But you got to be patient.
One interesting thing about this is that when we read time to act for God, it seems that the rabbis are thinking it is time for them to act
right
for God. I did a quick look. I wanted to see what the Psalm verse said. And as it would have it, there were King James and any number of other interpretations. And they interpret this as really it's time for God to act, not time for the rabbis to act and study Torah because it's being destroyed, but it's time for God to act. Torah's being destroyed. Time for you to act, God. So it's a whole other.
So that would be a different way of reading the Lamed, right? Eit lahasot lashem.
Yeah.
So do we read that as it's time to act on behalf of God, or is it time for God? It's the time for God to act. That would be another way to translate it, right? All of these things, and then the question is, of course, why, and so on. So that's what I was talking about before. But what we have here in both of those, in that verse and the verse from Proverbs, is we're focusing on the Torah, right? What we're beginning to start doing is a celebration of the Torah herself, and why that is, we'll see. Obviously, it's one of the things that the Chavraya love the most. This is what they see themselves as this is what they were created for. To just grow Torah, to create more Torah, and to uncover the hidden aspect of Torah that nobody ever saw before. So this is what they love, a Torah of love. They love this Torah, and now they're expounding it. And the time part was what I was saying before. There's previous to that, bringing up that verse, what we have is silent walking. If you had a a good cinematographer, with a really good sound track, you'd basically have just crunch, 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 crunch. You know, or shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. You know, you just have footsteps. And then finally somebody's going to say, okay, now it's time to start talking. And that brings us into what we're saying here. The creation of the world is preceded by silence, or maybe some kind of ineffable crunch, crunch, crunch. And then God starts talking. Let there be light, right? Wisdom opens up the mouth, and the mouth opens with wisdom, by means of wisdom. And the talking begins. Just like the rabbis, just like these friends, their talking begins after a very, very plain, you know, indescribable period of time. Okay, so she opens her mouth with wisdom, bet of Bereshit, in the beginning, as they have established, and it's been discussed many times in the Zohar and in the Midrashim. So the bet of Bereshit, we have here, according to the note, the bet is number 2. And therefore, the bet signifies Chokhmah, the second, the second Sphira. Who knows 2? I know 2. 2 is Chokhmah, right? You could have a whole different Seder, this coming Pesach. So that's one way to interpret it. Another way to interpret it would be to say that Beit is like Bayit, right? Bet is the house of Chokhmah. She opens up her mouth, right, and becomes a house for wisdom, right? She contains wisdom in her words. Where is wisdom contained? In understanding, in Bina, right? Which is the next step in the unfolding of God. So maybe that's being alluded to as well. That might be supported by what we see in the next sentence. Torah of love. Beryl.
Okay. All I have to do is figure out where we are.
Third line.
Torah of love on her tongue, Abraham, through whom he created the world, in whom he converses constantly.
Okay. So this is Torat Chesed al Lashonah. So here, this is, I forgot, Rabbi Chia? No, Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is saying, so let's follow this along. This verse is giving us an unfolding of how existence comes about, because existence, of course, is ruled by Torah. Torah is the blueprint for existence. The way that the Torah unfolds, that's the way that the world comes into existence. So the Torah is Torat Chesed. Chesed, of course, is the next Sphira, the next step in God's unfolding after Chokhmah and Binah. Right? Chokhmah and Binah are the two lovers, the father and the mother, the primordial father and mother, who are never separated, right? And they create the love between them. And that's Chesed. Chesed then becomes its own identity. And of course, Abraham is the earthly figure who becomes the instantiation of Chesed. Right? Abraham is the one that God created the world through. We have notes here. We can look at them. If you look at in 379, look at the second paragraph, please, in the note. According
to another midrashic motif, Abraham himself constitutes the foundation of the world. See Bereshit Rabbah, where Rabbi Yeshua's son of Korah, Korcha, offers a playful interpretation of Genesis 2:4. These are the generations of heaven and earth.
Behi Baram. Behi Baram.
Behi Baram, when they were created, transposing the letters of Behi Baram into Avraham through Abraham, indicating that heaven and earth were created for his sake.
Right. So, and if we had a similar play with letters, where? Anybody remember? Look back on page 308. Right? Look at the top page, top of the page. You got it?
He is deceived.
He's deceived me.
He's deceived me. Ze
Pa'amayim.
This 2 times. Why this 2 times? The verse should read 2 times, but a single word appears 2 times. Bech horati, my birthright, reappearing once again.
As birchati, my blessing.
Blessing. This happened 2 times.
Right. This is the flipping around of letters to bring out other levels of meaning. And then the next paragraph, we don't have to read it, but we had it where we had Judah, last week's Torah portion, says to his father, if we wouldn't have been hanging around here, futzing around, we would have come back already. Ze pa'amayim. We would have been able to come back twice already. And the Zohar says, Shavnu, Boshnu. Right? The same letters, switch them around. One of them is simply the outer level of our experience. We could go back and forth. And the other is, by not doing it, we are becoming humiliated. We are becoming embarrassed. So there's the letters as they are, and then there's an underlying meaning if you know how to switch around the letters. So switching around the letters is a legitimate way of finding meaning in the Torah, because switching around letters is actually the way the Zohar understands that the world was created. The letters are atoms, you know, in the ancient way of thinking about it. They're the building blocks of reality, and basically the way that you create stuff, you know, each is like a Lego block, and you take the letters and you put them together and you make little structures. So the same letters, you can put them around this way, you can put them around that way, and create different kinds of structures. So the letters carry the potential for meaning within them. And Avraham is Behi Baram. The world as it was created, what does that mean? It was as it was created through Abraham's love, right? Through Abraham living a life of love and putting out this idea that there is this one God of love. That's the world being created, not just in some cosmic, mythic way. What do people think about that last phrase, right? Abraham, through whom he created the world, in whom he converses constantly. How about that last part? In whom he converses constantly. Please explain. Yeah, Larry.
Well, it seems to me that there's an apparent contradiction between the world being based on wisdom versus the world being based on love. But this expresses that they're really the same thing, because wisdom is wisdom. Chokhmah expresses love all the time.
So Chokhmah expresses love. Chokhmah is not. Chokhmah, wisdom, is not love.
Right.
Chokhmah is Chokhmah.
It's like science.
However, Chokhmah is constantly in a loving relation with Binah. Right. This is the difference between the upper union and the lower union. Right. The upper union is the union between Chokhmah and Binah, the two loving partners who are never separated. The lower union is the union of Kucha B'richu and Shechina. That's a much more vulnerable, tenuous union. When the union is affected, all is right with the world. However, that lower union is tied to this unfolding of the world. The unfolding of the world can go awry. The unfolding of the world brings up all kinds of problems and troubles. So sometimes the union between the two lovers is broken. Chokhmah and Binah are an unbroken, loving couple. They are never separated. And that's what all of reality depends on. If they would ever be separated, if there would ever be a short circuit up there, then forget it. Then there would be nothing. So the world depends on Chokhmah being in love, not Chokhmah being love, but Chokhmah being in love all the time. And that the offspring of that loving relation is love. By being in love all the time, Chokhmah and Binah create love as a possibility, create love as a way of being in reality. So that's chesed. So the thing is, God in whom love, right? Love is, the world was created through Abraham, through love, and it is in love that God converses continually. Right? It is the talking out of reality, the expression, literally, the pressing out from God's being outwards to like a tube of toothpaste. It's all hidden within the tube, and then the world emerges the way a baby gets pushed out of the womb. The world is pushed out, is expressed by being the product of expression, by being talked out. But the talking is a talking in love.
And the lower union is between Tiferet and Malchut, or Tiferet and Shechina.
Malchut right. And Tiferet is also Kucha B'richu.
It is also Kucha B'richu. But then the in the middle or somewhere above that is on the one side Chesed and the other side Gevura.
Right. So we haven't gotten to Gevura yet, but we've gotten to Chesed.
Right. And this is like Olam Chesed Yibaneh.
Right, which is at the beginning of that note, the paragraph that I skipped. Right. That the world is built on love. All you need is love.
All you need is love. And then I was just noticing, like in the footnote at 386, they talk about that wisdom as being the foundation appears widely. It occurs to me, it also is the beginning of the book of the Gospel of John.
Where do you think they got it from?
It's Gnosticism. It's Gnosticism, right? Isn't that what?
Well, Gnosticism is a particular way of thinking about wisdom. It's a way which we're not going to go into right now. Gnosticism is a whole other kind of subject. The Zohar and Kabbalah in general are always in touch with Gnosticism, but there's an uneasy relationship between Kabbalah and Gnosticism. Okay, so we've one way or another, we've already alluded to a couple of steps in the unfolding of the world, but also with that term Torah always in the center. Okay, good. Now back to that bet.
Bet. Closed on that side, open on this side.
Right, so if you look at the letter bet as it's printed in the book, so on the right-hand side, on the top, on the right, on the bottom, you have the black ink that forms the three sides of the bet. And then the left-hand side, there is no letter, right? It's an open space. So go ahead.
Closed on that side, as is written, you will see my back. Open on this side to turn its face above. Open on this side to receive from above. A portico for welcoming. So it stands at the head of Torah and is subsequently filled.
All right, very nice. I like this. Usually when we think about a letter, let's say the bet, we think that the bet is the black shape of the letter. Let's just notice here that the Zohar doesn't think that only. The black shape of the letter is together with the white shape that is enclosed by the black shape, right? The opening is not the white space of the paper or the canvas or the parchment. That's not the letter. It's the letter, right? The letter is both the white and the black, both the ink part and the space that is created within the shape that's created by the black, which is the open space, right? They're all part of the letter. So therefore, we have, surprise, a dual aspect to the letter bet. The second letter, the number 2 letter, has 2 sides to it, so to speak, right? Closed on one side and open on the other side. Closed on that side. As it is written, you shall see my back. Okay, well, what is that all about? So the note tries to give us one interpretation. Let's look at 382.
Closed on that side, as is written, you will see my back. The verse continues, but my face will not be seen. Chokmah itself cannot be perceived, only its back. That is the emanation that follows it. For other interpretations,
see all the other commentaries. Okay, so that sentence, of course, is a really important sentence. When Moses says, tell me who you are, show me who you are, let me really, really get to know what your glory is. And God says, sorry, there's a limit here, right? I can't let you see my face. I can only let you see my back, right? So this letter bet is closed on one side to indicate that God is closed on one side. So the paradox, of course, is that it's the back of the bet which we can see, just like it's the back of God that we can see, but it's the seeing of God of the back is really about not letting us see God's face, right? That which we can see is actually a covering up of what we shouldn't see. God's back is an obstacle preventing us from seeing what we really want to see. And yet what we're seeing is God, but only God's back. So that's the back part of the bet. Okay, so open on this side to turn its face above. So now we switch. We switch from God's face, which can't be seen, to the bet's face, right? Which is open and turned toward the openness. And that is seeking more, seeking what else there is, right? Turning upwards to see what's beyond itself. So this is still God. Chokhmah looks up to even higher realms of God, but of course it's also us. Right? We are the ones who can't see beyond a certain thing, and yet we're always looking. We're always trying to see that little extra glimpse, right? That extra hint, that extra illusion, that not illusion, but illusion with an A, that extra little thing that can maybe give us a little warping view, like with an elevator mirror, right? So that you can see what's on the other side there. Can you really sort of see the other side? So turning its face above, seeking to look above, and yet not just to seek to look above, but also open to the side to receive from above. Right? If you keep that side open, then something can come in. Right? Something can enter into that space. If you are letting yourself be open, then the opening allows the flow to come in. You've had it, I think, other places. God says, if you just open for me, like just a tiny, tiny little pinhole, then I will open for you the entire opening of the world. Right? I will open up the entire world for you. Just give me a little pinhole's opening. You have to do that first. And then I will expand it and open it up, and you'll get the whole thing. So that's that side. Okay. Yeah. A portico for welcoming. Right. So it's like this kind of awning, the top of the bed, the side, and then the opening so that people can come in. What was Abraham famous for? Hospitality, right? For welcoming. So chesed is both the giving, but also the openness of being ready to let things in. Right? Hachnasat orchim, I'm going to be generous to you, but in order to be generous to you, I have to let you in. I have to make space for you in my realm. Okay. So it stands at the head of Torah and is subsequently filled. So what does that mean? So it stands at the beginning of the Torah, and the way we have it here is it's filled by the other letters. If we read the bet as Binah, then Binah is filled by Chokhmah. Binah is the one who welcomes her lover to come toward her, unite with her, and then engender all of the love and the life that comes out of that and goes beyond. So these are the possible associations that we can put in here. Let's read two more lines. The last line's on 310.
She opens her mouth with wisdom literally, as it written. With beginning, God created.
Right. By means, by using beginning, by using Chokhmah, God opens up and creates the entire world. Right. That's the beginning. Okay. Any comments? Yes, Sandra. Yeah.
I am still struck with the notion of walking, as I have been struck with it since the beginning. And actually, when you talked about the notion of a filmmaker and just listening to the crunch, crunch, or the shuffle before the words, what I really thought about, is this the Zohar's way of saying these human beings are still human, They reach, in a sense, for the stars, they reach for God, but they're here and they're grounded. And let us not forget, because the stories go on and get very esoteric as they reach, but then they come to a point of ending or fullness, and then they're walking again, and then they meet other people. And I keep getting that sense walking is the basic activity, well, food, of course, but it's a basic activity of humanity, and that's how we connect. We walk, and maybe it's even more on my mind because things are so different during the pandemic. I seem to walk more. It's, you know, and so I'm struck with this grounding.
Good idea. Good idea to keep walking. Yes, I think well said. I think that that's very much to the point. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Jennifer.
Just a quick observation from a pretty newbie. I feel like where it's really interesting to look at Gnosticism with this, I feel like it is closer in spirit to Plotinus and Neoplatonism, which also touches Gnosticism. I got to ask, I think he's a rabbi, Rabbi Arthur Green, once about it when he was here. And he said, you know, he didn't think that the rabbis who engaged in Zohar and Torah and Kabbalah ever studied, you know, Neoplatonism, but that those ideas were out there. And I feel like Gnosticism has some issues that Neoplatonism doesn't have in the same way. It's in some ways a nicer association. And I don't want to put that too far, but
Neoplatonism is nicer.
In some ways, it doesn't have some of the same issues that Gnosticism ends up with. And I feel like from the little I've seen of Kabbalah, it is closer in spirit to Neoplatonism, although they both have relations with Gnosticism. Like they all kind of cross over at some point. Right. That's all. It's just a...
So I mean, the thing with Gnosticism, which I didn't want to get into, is the darkness that gets involved in talking about things. And hang around a little bit. We just came out of a bunch of sessions talking about real darkness. So the darkness is in there. It's not all rosy and you know, just this kind of like.
Oh yeah, neither is Plotinus, but it's, you know, you can have that in different ways, and that's, you know.
Right. Elusive is not something that can just go away. So that's the thing. Yeah. All right, so we'll continue hopefully next week. And everybody enjoy your Chinese food if you have it. And all good things, and stay healthy, I hope, and safe. And good luck with the world finding some improvement. Yes. Okay. Zaigesin, thank you.
Yoshikoa.
Nice walk.
Yasha